Hi, I'm Shelley Wood and this is my tiny sewing room where I make doll clothes sewing videos. Today I'm going to show you how to make a pretty little dress with a super simple faux collar. And today's free dress pattern will fit the Lottie dolls, but it will also fit a number of other really small dolls. And this is exciting too. I'm going to show you how to sew a zipper today. Before we begin, you'll need to go to shelleywood.com to download and print this free PDF sewing pattern. Use the pattern to cut out the two pieces you see here. It's optional, but if you want a really full skirt like mine is, use the skirt part of the pattern to cut out a swatch or two of tulle, and that'll make your skirt full. You'll also need a few sewing notions, a 3-inch zipper, which is shown at the right in black here, and some contrasting color bias tape. Now I'm using 1/2 inch unfolded, but a 1/4 inch folded is also okay. I bought my zippers at Zipper Stop, and I have a link to their store in the description to help you find small zippers. You'll also need to tape your bodice pattern together like you see me doing right here. So you just cut out the two pieces, lay one on top of the other and tape. Now see those cuts in the bodice front? Those are going to be the darts. We'll be sewing those first. So what you do is fold the bodice so that it brings those dart pieces together and then stitch them together. Sew both darts. Whip stitch to sew some bias tape to one of the armhole areas. I'm doing that here in fast motion. So I'm using a whip stitch for this, and if you need help with a whip stitch, I have a tutorial in the description below this video on YouTube. You just keep whip stitching until you get to the end of the armhole area, and then you cut your bias tape free. So I don't actually cut my bias tape until I'm all the way done, and then I cut it. Attach your bias tape to both armhole areas like I just did there. Fold the back closure area only once and use a tiny baste stitch to hold it in place. Now, if you need help with basting, we're going to do a lot of that with this. There's a handy tutorial below. Baste the other back closure area exactly the same way and use your pattern to guide the depth of that fold. Next, we'll stitch a bias tape collar to the bodice. It's going to be a faux collar, not a real one. We're just using bias tape to imply a collar. So you fold the raw edge of the bias tape down like that. And then, folding the bias tape in half, you're going to extend it around the raw edge of the collar area of the bodice. So you can see I'm going to fold it inside and around, and it's very important that you be right in the center of the front of the bodice with your starter stitches. So you'll want to make sure your collar where you start sewing is right in the middle, and I'm sorry I'm off of the camera angle there, but you can see I'm checking to make sure I'm right in the middle between those two darts. You're going to sew this bias tape down to appear to look like a collar. And the stitch we're using again will be the whip stitch. So I insert my needle like this, and notice I'm using black thread. I do recommend that you use thread that matches the color of the collar. And keep your stitches very close to the bias tape edge so that it doesn't appear to be stitched on. You want those stitches to be kind of hidden under the collar. And you'll see I kind of fold, just barely fold the edge of the fabric around the yellow fabric part of the bodice. and then I wrap the bias tape around and begin my whip stitch right here. I kept this really slow. I normally speed these up, these videos, but I wanted you to see exactly what I'm doing here. So there's my first of the whip stitches. And then I insert really close to the edge of the bias tape again, and I continue to whip stitch all the way around the collar to the back of the collar. So I'm just right now applying the very front of the collar to the bodice, and again checking to make sure that I'm right in between my darts, folding it on either side of the bodice front, and then I stitch until I get to the very back. I fold it in a little bit as I stitch it to the back of the collar, and I attach both sides of the faux collar just like this. So again, fold and then align it to the center of the front of the bodice. Okay, once you feel comfortable that you have it lined up nicely, you don't want a gap there. You really want the bias tape to come in contact with the other bias tape. And then you're ready to start stitching. Again, I'm going to use a whip stitch, same color of thread as the collar. Very close to the bias tape. This is not a project for beginners. It's going to take a little bit of detailed work to get those stitches to stay hidden kind of under the collar so it doesn't look like it's stitched on even though it is. And this kind of solves the problem of the collar that won't lay flat. I know that those of us who sew doll clothes often have this problem where you create a collar and instead of it laying flat like it would on a human being, it just sticks out like crazy. And granted, it's not a real collar, but for children who are playing, it sure looks real, and they enjoy playing with it in spite of the fact that you can't get your fingers under that collar because it's sewn on. Now notice I'm folding the back end of this collar piece to kind of hide the raw edge of the bias tape underneath the collar. Again, this can be kind of tricky, but I want to make sure that I fold that raw edge down, and then I just continue to whip stitch until I get the whole second piece of collar attached. So it's going to require that you do this for one piece for the right side and another collar piece for the left side. It's not one collar piece. And this is my whip stitch, just going around. You can see I'm really taking my time to make sure that each stitch is well hidden under the collar so it doesn't look like it's stitched on. And there's my back piece that has been folded under a little bit. I'm going to whip stitch around the edges of that back piece to attach it together. And I actually attach the inside collar to the outside collar too. So I'm sewing all the way through to the very other side, to the underside of the collar, all the way from one side to the other. And when you're done, then you'll want to tie a knot on the underside of the bodice, the wrong side, and that's what I'll do right here. I'll tie a little knot there. Lay the bodice back against the bodice front, keeping right sides together. Stitch from the underarm to the bottom of the bodice. Once this seam is done, you'll fold the other back down against the front and sew an identical seam on the opposite side. Invert the bodice and set the bodice aside for a moment so we can work on the skirt. Fold one of the long sides of the skirt once and then a second time to create a hem. Some people call it a rolled hem. I tend to call it a double fold hem. I prefer to use a whip stitch to hem my garments, but of course you can use your sewing machine too to hem the garment. Now, we've already talked about whip stitch. Just a reminder that there is a link to my whip stitch tutorial below this video on YouTube. If you wish to add tulle for a petticoat, now is a good time to baste it to the skirt before moving on. Again, I have provided a link to my basting video. Make sure your tulle isn't longer than the skirt at this point. Start your gathers about 1/4 inch or 6 millimeters from the edge of the skirt, and then gather the unhemmed side of the skirt. Incorporate the tulle in your gathers. Leave another 1/4 inch or 6 millimeters of ungathered fabric on both sides of the skirt. Before tying a knot in your gather thread, I recommend that you pin the skirt to the bodice to make sure it's going to fit, keeping right sides together. When you're sure the skirt and bodice are going to fit together, then it's okay to knot your gathers. Now stitch the skirt to the bodice. Remove straight pins when you're done with this step. And there should still be that 1/4 inch or 6 millimeters of extra fabric overhanging on both sides of the skirt, and this is where we're going to attach the zipper. So it's time to attach the zipper. Rather than choosing a contrasting color, I do recommend using a zipper that actually matches your fabric. I mean, you could try a contrasting color, but for this dress I recommend using a 3-inch zipper, and that means about 7 centimeters of zipper, and that's not including the non-zippable ends. Now note, this gives you 7 centimeters to actually zip together. Alright, so you take your zipper and you lay it alongside the bodice back. The zipper pull needs to be near the collar. Now I folded the skirt's edge under before I started attaching my skirt portion, and notice I'm using a baste stitch. You don't want to use a stitch that's permanent yet. Fold the edge of the skirt under as you baste, and one thing that might help is to pin the folded edge of the skirt to hold it in place while you're basting. I used a straight pin to hold the skirt's folded edge in place while basting, but you don't have to. It's time to tie a knot at the very bottom. Notice that we have a little bit of extra overhang on that zipper, and that's okay. That's what you want. You need that little bit of extra at the bottom, and there should be some extra at the top. See how that's kind of sticking out at the bottom? It's okay. We're going to do something with that. Same with the top. We're going to do something with that. So unzip, just like you see me doing here, and we're back to basting, but we're going to baste the other side. So you want to check to make sure that collars are well aligned and that the zipper is well aligned before you start to baste. And one of the reasons why we use a baste stitch is because it's very easy to have that zipper not be aligned. So use a baste stitch to connect the dress to the zipper, and that way you can easily take your stitches out if you find it isn't well aligned. When you get toward the bottom of the dress, you're going to zip up a little bit and then continue basting. So at the bottom of the bodice part, you're going to zip up and then fold the skirt under and continue basting all the way to the bottom of the zipper. And here you tie a knot. Again, we're not quite to the very bitty bottom of the zipper because we have to do something with that. You'll find out here shortly what we're going to do with the bottom of the zipper. So we're just tying a knot in our baste stitch. Later we will create a permanent stitch, but you'll want to check your zipper at this stage and make sure that you've got it in there right, and if not, redo the baste. So here's how it looks so far. And you can see there's some zipper bits at the top, and we've got zipper bits at the bottom, and that's okay. That's what we want, believe it or not. So invert the whole dress, pinch together the bottom of the skirt, and I'm going to show you what I mean by that. So we invert, we turn it wrong side out, okay? Try to get all those bits of zipper sticking out where they're supposed to be. All right, and then right here at the bottom, you're going to pinch all of this together. The tulle, the cotton, and the zipper. Incorporating the tulle and the end of the zipper, you're going to backstitch to join this part of the skirt together. And carefully trim excess zipper fabric from the top. So you want to make sure you don't accidentally cut into the collar. Really carefully look it over. You're going to trim off that extra bit at the top. Really carefully check to make sure you're not accidentally cutting part of the dress. Now your zipper top is going to be a little raw. We're going to use a little Dritz fray check to seal that cut. I also use wax paper to dry my zipper on top of it. So a little fray check. And if you go to my website, I have a link so you can easily find some fray check. On Amazon, it's very inexpensive. You just drizzle a little of this across the top of the zipper. Make sure you don't get the zipper pull in it. Allow it to dry for about 30 minutes or so, and then invert the dress. Now, once you invert the dress, it's a good idea to try your zipper to make sure you didn't accidentally glue it shut, because Dritz fray check is a type of glue. So really zip and unzip to make sure it really works. If there's an issue with it, just give it a little water and wash it off. At this point, you've only basted the zipper, but now we're going to backstitch close to the edge of the fabric. This backstitch will make the zipper more sturdy. Start sewing with a fully open zipper. So I'm going to backstitch from the collar to about the waistline, and then at the waistline I'm going to partially zip up and continue to baste down to the bottom of the zipper. Okay, when you're ready to sew across the bottom of the zipper, then you want to make sure that you're zipped up to get to that bottom nicely. Okay, and then you just kind of backstitch across and then back up the other side. Now I recommend that you zip it all the way down again to finish your backstitch. So you zip it down and then you finish backstitching from about the waist or so all the way back up to the collar. So I was a little bit lower than the waist, but that's okay. And this backstitch makes it nice and sturdy, so children playing with it won't damage the zipper. You know how doll dresses, the zipper can come out? If you do a backstitch, it makes it sturdy. Always test your zipper to make sure you like it. It's just a good idea to make sure that it's going to work and that you didn't accidentally sew part of the zipper you don't want sewn. It's such a cute little dress. I just love this dress. So pretty. Okay. And now you're ready to try it on your doll. She is so cute in this. Just look at that. Little Lottie doll. Adorable.
What if there was an easy way to take a big doll pattern and resize it to fit a little doll, or vice versa? I'm Shelley Wood, the doll clothing designer, and in my pattern alteration class, I'm going to share with you my resizing formula.
Pattern alteration is when you take a pattern that you already own and you make changes to it. Let's say a dress doesn't fit your doll quite right. I'll show you how to create a gusset to extend the dress's bodice. Along the same lines, I'll show you how to use a doll's body measurements to lengthen and shorten shirt sleeves, and to recreate the pants patterns you already own so they will fit dolls of different shapes and sizes. Following my instructions, you'll learn how to reshape dresses and skirts, making them fuller or less full depending on the look you're going for. With this collection of more than 40 videos, you'll use my measurement guide and dozens of tips and tricks to create a full wardrobe for the doll or dolls of your choice.
I invite you to join me. We are going to have so much fun.